Hi everyone, welcome to this online class. And today the subject is commercial application. And today I'm taking the chapter marketing mix, which also I have been doing it for the last few classes. And today's topic is product lifecycle, meaning and concept, stages in the PLC, benefits of PLC, that means product lifecycle, and some past questions on this topic. What is a product lifecycle? Like a product also has a life like any human being. It takes birth, it lives in between and dies one day. Right? The lifetime, the life length of a product is known as product lifecycle. It is very important for a company to know the product lifecycle of any product because it helps the company to decide so many different things, whether to continue with the product, whether to bring some innovation in the product, whether to increase the promotion expenses, so on. So many other marketing strategies can be decided depending on the product life cycle. Now, if we need to define a product life cycle, it is the life cycle of a product is known as product life cycle. It begins with the launch of a product in the market for sale and ends when the product is abandoned. The PLC is different for different products. As you see in the diagram, a product moves through 5 different stages of its life cycle. The first is being introduction, then goes to the growth stage, maturity stage, decline, and lastly the abandonment. That means lastly the product goes out of the market. Now this dark line or this thick line indicates the sales of a product, and this dotted line indicates the profit of a product, profit earned at various stages, right? Now when a product moves from one stage to another stage, the sales also differ, profit also differ. Like see here. Now let's take the first stage, introduction stage. Introduction stage is that stage in which the product is launched, in which the product is brought into the market. During this stage, people do not know about the product. So lots of promotional expenses or promotional strategies have to be introduced. Lots of advertisement have to be done in order to make the product familiar with the people. During this stage, the product has very less demand. There may be less customers or there may be no customers. So the profit earned during this stage is negative or is nil, and the cost of introducing the product may be very high. Okay? Like if you talk about a product, let's say, you may like self-driven car is in the introduction stage. Holographic projection is also in the introduction stage. Right? They are just introduced into the market. So in the introduction stage, let's see what are the profits. You have low sales. Sales is very low because the product is just introduced in the market. There's very less customer. Very high promotional cost, like advertisement expenses are very high. Negative profit. Look at the here line, the profit line. It is negative. Few competitors. There may not be any competitors in the market because the product is just launched. High cost. And another ill effect in the introduction or the danger thing in the introduction phase is most of the product fail in this stage. They cannot take off. Right? Now let's see the strategies. What a company or the marketer has to do in order to take the product to the next stage, right? Number A, proper advertisement and publicity of the product has to be done. It should be a persuasive advertisement or informative advertisement should be undertaken in order to communicate with the customers. The incentives like money back guarantee can be offered to persuade the people. Assured cashback can also be given to the people. Try the pouch kind of facilities can also be given in order to so that the people develop the taste for the product. Number B, attractive gifts to customers as an introductory offer. Selective distribution and attractive discount to dealers. Removing technical and other deficiencies in the product. Yes, the product is just launched in the market, so there may be some difficulties with regard to techniques, technology. So this has to be improved. Pricing strategy. There are two pricing strategies can be adopted in the introductory phase. It may be a penetrating pricing or skimming pricing. Penetrating pricing means fixing a very low price so that the product gets the demand very quick. The product becomes popular very fast. Or it may be skimming pricing. Skimming pricing method is a method of fixing a very high price in the beginning. It happens with a very premium products, okay? Charging high price so that most of the cost is recovered in the initial phase itself. And if it is a skimming pricing method, the target customer will be the rich class of people who like to buy the product as a precious product or as a status symbol in the society. Now we go into the growth stage. This is the second phase in the product life cycle. In the growth stage, what you can see here, look at this line. This is the sales line. It is moving upward. That it indicates that sales is increasing. Till this point, a certain point here, you see the sales increases at the increasing rate, but after some time, you see that sales increases but at a decreasing rate. So this is what happens in a growth phase. Sales increasing, is rapidly increasing, right? Then here, in the growth phase, the marketers would like to expand the market, so it would like to advertise the product in different markets or in different places, so the promotional expenses is going to be very high. New markets are explored. Since the sales is increasing, so the profit will also increase. Now, since the product has gone to the next stage, so there may be increase in the competition. New firms will join the market because they see that the previous firms are earning profit. Sales are increasing. There is much demand for the product. So the new firms will be attracted to the market. So the competition increases. But since the competition is increasing, so there may be a price cut or price may be decreased to some extent, right? Or there may be an offer of discounts in order to reduce the price. Now let's see what would be the strategy if a firm needs to move from, or the product needs to move from one phase to another phase. So these strategies can be adopted. Heavy advertising to create brand image and to stimulate sales. The amount of advertisement has to be increased because the firm wants to explore the new market. So advertisement has to be done in the new market. Expanding distribution channels to make the product available wherever demanded. So making the product readily available, right? So here you increase the outlets, distribution outlets. Introducing new version of the product to cater to the needs of different types of customers, like making a smaller pouch or different variants so that different customers will buy the product according to their likes or needs. Keeping the price at competitive levels. So charging the price what the competitors are charging. greater emphasis on customer services, maybe like uh, making the products available at the doorsteps kind of thing, okay? Now we go on to the next phase, which is the maturity stage. You see here in the maturity stage, sales also increases, but at a decreasing rate. It reaches the peak, and then it starts decreasing. Similarly here, profit also increases at a certain point, then again it decreases. So you have the features like, and in the maturity stage, the product is well known. It is well accepted by the customers. There are no new customers, okay? Or peak sales, the sales are high. You have intensive distribution. Intensive distribution means having more outlets so that you would like to make your products readily available. Highest profit. Now this is the stage where the firm earns the highest profit. Now since firm earns the highest profit, it attracts the other firms also to come into the market. So it increases competition. Now when there are lots of firms making the product, so the firm fights with one another, so they would like to bring product differentiation. So product differentiation is done here by adding new features or bringing some enhancement in the feature of the product. Now since there is a huge competition, so there may be again a price reduction. Now we'll see the strategies adopted again in this stage. Number one, differentiating the product from competitors' product. You make your product different from the other product, and that is by adding new features. Use of persuasive advertising. Now here the objective of advertising is not to inform the customers, but to convince them to buy the product because you want to increase the sales of the product. Offering buying incentives like buy two, get one free kind of things. Extending the warranty period like lifetime warranty. Introducing reusable packaging. Developing new market, that means exploring new market. Sending the product to a new market. Capturing the new customers. Highlighting new uses of the product. Since you want to increase the sales of the product, you want to add new customers to your product, right? So what you need to do is, you need to highlight the uses of the product so that the customers get convinced or get persuaded to buy the product looking at the uses of the product. Now next we go to the decline stage. Look at the graph here or the picture here. You see the sales figure, the sales line sloping downward. It indicates that the sales starts decreasing drastically. Why? Because there are no new takers. There are no new customers. Most of the customers have already tried the product. Now since the sales is decreasing, that means here the profit is also decreasing. So this is the phase where you see declining sales. And now since most of the customers have already been captured, there are no new customers, so the promotional expenses are decreased. You lower the promotional expenses, right? You cut short some of the advertisement, you cut short some of the distributors. Now since the profit is decreasing, sales is decreasing, some of the firm will go out of the market. They'll stop producing this particular product. So the competition decreases. Now, since you want to increase the sales, so what you would like to do? You would like to cut the price. So you decrease the price so that the sales volume increases. And the objective of this declining phase is controlling the cost or minimizing the cost, so that the firm will still earn the profit. Now, since the product has no more customers, so it goes into the Strategies we need to adopt in the declining stage. So number one, new product looks. Now, since the product is losing its customer, the product has to attract the customers. So some changes has to be brought in the product so that it has a good look. More features may be added to the product. Economy models like smaller packs may be introduced to revive the market. New and attractive packaging may be used to attract customers, and selective promotion may be adopted to reduce distribution cost. So here, not all distributors is used here. Some of may be discontinued with, and only few distributors may be taken in order to distribute the product. Now we go on to the last stage of a product life cycle, that is abandon stage. This is a stage where the product dies, the product goes out of the market. Now since the product has no more customers to take the product, so this product is replaced with a better one, with a new one, with new technology, with a better future, right? So this is a phase where the company or the firm earns a heavy loss. There are no customers, no future for the product, so the product ultimately goes out of the market. So these are the different stages in a product life cycle. A product, different product will have different product life cycle. It is not necessary that the same life cycle will be there for all the products. Again, the product life cycle differ from market to market, and a product may be in one phase of a life cycle in one market, right? And it may be in another phase in another market. Take an example here. If you talk about a typewriter, the typewriter in our place or in a metropolitan cities is in an abandon phase or it's in a decline phase. But if you look at the rural sectors, right, the typewriter may be in the maturity phase kind of thing, okay? So the advantages of product life cycle. What is the advantage that the company will have if they know the product life cycle of their product? Number one, when PLC is known, the firm can prepare an effective product plan and promotional strategies. We have seen different strategies for the different phases. So if a company knows the phase of life cycle of their product, they can devise a proper strategy in order to extend the phase of that particular product. Business organization can take corrective measures or steps before the decline of the product. The maturity stage can be extended by finding new uses of the product or improving the features, quality, or design of the product. Okay, so here we take some of the past questions, right? Let's say these are the different kind of questions you may be asked from this topic. Number one, what do you understand by PLC? Explain any two stages in PLC. So here you have two parts in the question. First of all, read the meaning of PLC and then explain two stages. There are 5 stages, so you can take any two and then explain them. Number two, mention the various stages of product life cycle. How is product life cycle advantages? We have just done the various stages of product life cycle. You have just seen there are 5 stages. So you go to mention. Here is mention. Here is written mention. So you got to just write those 5 different stages. No need to explain. The second part is how is PLC advantages. I've just explained the advantages of PLC. That is what you got to write. Number 3, what happens to a product in the decline stage of its life cycle? This is quite confusing. You might land up explaining decline stage, but here you are not asked to write about the decline stage. Here you are asked to write what happens to a product in the decline stage of its life cycle. What happens to a product? The product will have no sales, the product loses the customer, and the product may go out of the market. What is the objective of the marketer in the growth and decline stage of the PLC? This is 2 marks question. Here you are asked to write only the objective. So no need to explain about the growth stage or decline stage. Now, can you tell me what is the objective in the growth stage? It is expanding the market. Okay? And the objective in the decline stage is to control the cost so that the company still earns profit. State the strategy usually applied at the decline stage of a product life cycle. We have already seen. State the ways by which life cycle of a product may be extended. What are the different ways? Improving the product, bringing the new uses of the product, right? Making the product available at a smaller pouch. It may be more persuasive advertising can be used, and so on. Number 7, you are the marketing manager of an FMCG company, and you find that one of your products, a washing detergent, is in its growth stage. Discuss the steps that you would take to increase your sales at this stage. So here we can explain those strategies that I've explained under the growth stage, right? So now the importance of a product life cycle. It is an important principle manufacturers need to understand in order to make a profit and stay in business. So once they understand the PLC of the product, they can figure out the profit that they are going to earn in each of the phase, right? And what they need to do in order to stay in the business or in order to stay in the market. It helps to manage product throughout their lifetime, applying the right resources and sales and marketing strategies depending on what stages products are in the cycle. So, in order to extend the product, in order to make the product available in the market, okay, what are the different strategies a company or the firm or the marketer needs to adopt? They can pretty well understand if they comprehend the product life cycle of their product. Okay? So here we come to the end of this today's topic. So thank you.
Hello everyone. Today I'm here again with another chapter, that is natural vegetation, which is chapter number 6. Okay. First of all, natural vegetation of India. Now, what is natural vegetation? Among the various resources, natural resources, vegetation plays a very significant role because it directly affects the climate, as well as, apart from that, it also gives an overview about the environment and the economic development of a country. So natural vegetation actually refers to a plant community which we see as such, okay, which has been grown without any human aid or without any human interference together. Now, as we know, forests, which are our natural resources, which you can see are renewable resources and help in maintaining the ecological balance. It reduces pollution, maintains humidity, purify air, is the source of timber, fruits, flowers, various medicines, herbs. So the importance, as we see, among all these, very important over here, it maintains the ecological balance, the environmental balance, how it is maintained. Apart from that, very important, all of us we are aware of, facing this problem of reduction of pollution, right? This also, apart from that, forest also helps in the prevention of soil erosion, the conservation of soil. And apart from that, it is a habitat for a variety of wildlife, for both, as we talk about a homeland for both flora and fauna. As we have already discussed here, the natural vegetation of India depends mainly on its categorized. As we know, from the high mountainous regions, we've seen the plains, we've seen the plateaus, we've seen the hills, we've seen the the tidal coastal areas. Okay, so in these different regions, we find different kind of vegetation. So on what basis are these forests categorized, or the vegetation, how is it categorized, right? So there are two factors. The natural vegetation of India depends mainly on two factors. See, we find different kind of vegetation, okay, from very high mountainous regions to the plateaus, the areas with the, let's say, where you find a different kind of vegetation. In the plains, it's yet another different kind of vegetation. The coastal areas, in the deserts, semi-desert regions, all right? So these different kind of vegetation or different kind of forest areas, the vegetation and the forest area is found depending on two factors. The first one is variation in the amount of rainfall. Now there are places with very heavy rainfall, and these are the areas where you find the tropical evergreen forest. Now areas with very little amount of rainfall, less amount, where you find scrub or desert, semi-desert kind of vegetation. And depending on the amount of rainfall, the plants are different, the characteristics, so we are going to move on to that. Then another factor is variation in relief. Relief means the structure, as I've already explained. Like in the very high mountainous region, we find mountain forest. Then we have the deciduous type of forest. We have the desert and semi-desert vegetation, thorn forest. Then in the coastal areas, we have the tidal or the mangrove or littoral forest also. Now the natural vegetation of India can be categorized, okay, accordingly. The first one, forests based on variation of rainfall. You may get a question as to name the forests which are based on the variation of rainfall, or name the forests which are based on relief. So forests based on variation of rainfall, right, is the first one, tropical evergreen forest. Second, deciduous monsoon forest. Then we have desert and semi-desert vegetation and thorn and scrub forest. If you look at the first one, tropical evergreen and the desert vegetation, if you see, from here you can make out as to these are the areas where the rainfall variation is on a very large scale. Like evergreen forest, from the word itself, evergreen means like they do not shed the leaves at one time in a year. So they remain evergreen throughout, and they are found in the tropical areas. The second one is deciduous monsoon, desert, semi-desert, and the scrub and thorn forest. So these are the forests which are found on the basis of the variation of rainfall. On the variation of rainfall, this is the vegetation. Now, based on relief, there are just two. Based on relief means based on the physical structure. Based on the physical structure, there are two. So the first one is mountain or mixed forest, and the second one is mangrove. It's also called tidal. I've given all the three options here, or littoral forest, which is found along the coastal areas, around the coastal region. So remember these two, right? Forest based on variation of rainfall, there are four, and forest based on variation of relief, there are two. That is mountain and mangrove forest. Okay. Now we move on with the first one, that is, the map is there, which is shown, tropical evergreen, okay? Or it's also called the rainforest. Now, why is it called the rainforest? Before we move ahead, okay? It's called the tropical evergreen. It's also called the rainforest because these are the areas, these are the forests that receive a very heavy amount of rainfall, almost all throughout the year. Now, when we do the characteristic feature of the different climatic regions, all right, zones, the first one that we know of is the equatorial, it's called the rainforest, the equatorial region, where the rainfall is almost throughout the year, all right. So that is why it's called the rainforest. Now, here you have to know the climate and the rainfall. Climate, if you see, the temperature ranges. Now, these are certain things, facts, okay, you have to remember. There's no other way, but you have to know, because they might give you a question as to state the climatic requirement, or let's say based on this evergreen forest, okay, what is the climate, or name the species, and most important, they'll ask you for the characteristics also, right? So here, the temperature ranges from 25 to 27 degrees Celsius. Now, later on, in my next session, I'll be giving you all the format, okay, table format with all the different vegetation, with the climate, the characteristics, and the species, so it'll be easy for you to study. So even when you're at home right now, you'll have enough time to sit back, okay, and at least take the trouble of doing it in the table format. I'll give you an example of it, I'll give you the format, I'll show it to you all in the next class, and then you can just follow as it is. So you will get a clear picture as to how you are going to study the entire vegetation type in one particular page. So it'll be easy for you, right? So that will come later on. Now, rainfall is more than 200 centimeters, see. Whereas if you compare with the desert vegetation, in those areas you'll find that the rainfall is hardly 25 to 30 centimeter annually. We are talking about annual rainfall, right? So temperature and rainfall, that's the climate for the tropical evergreen or the tropical rainforest. Now, we move on with the characteristics. These forests are found, simple as that, because the rainfall is heavy, so you can say from the topic itself, see the first characteristic without taking so much trouble. See, these forests are found in areas of heavy rainfall. That is why they are known as the rainforests, right? Another important thing is that they do not shed the leaves at the same time and remain evergreen. That is why they are called the evergreen tropical forest, or they are also known as the tropical evergreen forest. Why are they called evergreen? Is because they do not shed the leaves at the same time. They do shed the leaves, but not at the same time. So that is why they are known as the evergreen forest. And apart from that, though I have not mentioned there, these forests are found in mixed stands, all right? So the same variety is not found in the same place. So mixed variety of trees are found. So economic exploitation of the tropical evergreen forest is quite difficult compared to the deciduous monsoon forest. We'll come to that, right? So another feature, as I've already told you, first one, they are called the rainforest because they are found in areas of very heavy rainfall. Secondly is that they do not shed the leaves at the same time, so that is why they are also called the evergreen forest. Apart from that, these forests, the trees in these forests are found in mixed stands. The same variety is not easy to find it in the same area. Maybe one variety is here, the other variety may be the same variety may be found in another part of the forest, and these forests are very dense, very, very dense. So because of that, they are not economically exploited, right? It's mentioned here, these forests have not been economically exploited due to dense undergrowth and lack of transport facilities. So felling of the trees, cutting down of the trees, we are talking about the felling of the trees becomes a problem. Okay. These are some of the species or the varieties of the tropical evergreen forest. The common ones I've taken it out. There are many, but these are just to name a few. Rosewood, sesame, gurjan, bamboo, canes, okay, etc. These are some of the species or the varieties which are found in the tropical evergreen forest, okay. Now, we move on with the next vegetation type, which is deciduous monsoon forest. From the word, if you see right up here, monsoon, which means to say that these areas, okay, these forests, if you look at the area also comparatively, it covers a very large area. The largest area is covered, the largest area of natural vegetation in India is covered by deciduous monsoon forest, right? The climatic condition again over here, the average annual temperature ranges from 24 degrees Celsius to 27 degrees Celsius, and the rainfall again, this is also another area of heavy rainfall, which is ranging between 150 to 200 centimeters. Now see, children, these figures, these numbers, there's no other way out, but you have to remember, because they'll ask you a question as to, based on this, or tropical or let's say deciduous monsoon forest, or desert vegetation, or littoral forest, or mangrove, okay, what is the climate requirement, or what is the rainfall? So you'll have to give the figures over here, okay. So for that purpose, I will show it to you in the table format in the next class, in my next session, right? Now, the characteristic is, if you look at the map over here, if you look at this map here, you find that the deciduous monsoon forest covers a very, very large area. It covers a large area, largest area, I must say, right? So these occupy much larger area than the evergreen forest or the tropical evergreen forest. Because compared to the previous one, it was found only in some areas. Look at the deciduous monsoon. It's covering such a large area over here compared to the evergreen forest. Now, they are more economically exploited as they are found in pure stands. All right? So that is, the deciduous monsoon forests are more economically exploited compared to the evergreen forests, because evergreen forests, as I said, they are found in mixed stands, whereas the deciduous monsoon forests are found in pure stands. So a proper method of felling of the trees can be done in a much better way. Now, these are some of the species or the varieties of trees that are found in the deciduous monsoon forest. That is teak, sal, sandalwood, simil, eucalyptus, okay? And they are used for a variety. The uses are, like it is uncountable, because it is to be done on a very, very large scale. And it is used for both household purposes, for construction, as well as in the industrial sector also, right? Now, it is an important, this one, eucalyptus, as we can see over here in this, let's say in this vegetation type, is an important tree of the forest which we are talking about, the Karnataka, as it is used for paper industry and oil for medicinal purposes. Eucalyptus oil, which is used, okay? Especially as one of the example you can give is when it is used in the mosquito repellents and all, okay, eucalyptus, and for other industrial use and medicinal purposes also, okay? So there are a variety of uses. Then we move on with the next. This is another vegetation type, which is desert and semi-desert vegetation. Here, the climate, as you see, again, ranges from 25 to 27, and look at the rainfall from the word desert. That is why the rainfall is less than 25 centimeter. It's less than that. We are talking about annual rainfall, not on a daily basis, not on a diurnal basis, but it is annual rainfall, right? Now, the characteristic of the desert vegetation, plants that grow in this type of vegetation are called xerophytes. Now, you must have seen the plants when we talk about, like, suppose I tell you to close your eyes and imagine a desert with the vegetation. The first thing that comes in your mind is, like, you see the sand dunes, you see date palms, you see let's say thorny scrubs, bushes, and of course cactus. Okay. Now, if you look at a cactus, it is thick and fleshy. Apart from that, the leaves have been transformed into thorns and spines. That is in order to reduce the loss of water, which is transpiration, to prevent or to reduce the loss of water through transpiration. The leaves have been transformed into it. Okay, so that is why it's called xerophyte. Xerophytic plants mean those plants where the leaves have been transformed into, or they get transformed into thorns and spines. And apart from that, the leaves are very thick and fleshy. Apart from that, the roots go very deep inside the soil in search of water and to hold it very, very strongly, because one of the things that in the desert we experience is the movement of the winds, which are very, very strong. So just in case it gets uprooted or so, in that case, these plants they have adapted themselves. This is called adaptation, right? They've adapted themselves in such a way that they can survive in such heat as well as with very little amount of water, all right? As I mentioned, they have long roots to draw water as rainfall is very scarce, and thick fleshy leaves to store water during the droughts. And this is a very common feature, droughts, in the desert and semi-desert, let's say, areas altogether, okay, where you find this kind of vegetation. So these are the two characteristics. I've just done two each so that it'll be easy for you to remember, right? Then the species, as you can see, barbel, that's a common name, acacia, date palms. These are some of the species of varieties of plants that you get to see in a desert or semi-desert region, right? Then we move on with the last one, which is on the variation of rainfall. This is categories, which is on the variation of rainfall. The next one is thorn and scrub forest, where the temperature, which you see again ranging between 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. And rainfall compared to the desert vegetation, it is little more because the rainfall is less than 100 centimeter, whereas in desert vegetation, rainfall is less than 25 to 30 centimeters, right? The characteristic over here, the vegetation found here is scrub, stunted trees with long roots, almost the same as desert vegetation, okay? And it has long tapering roots, thorny branches, which you can see small fleshy leaves in order to store water. So this is also another adaptation again, how the vegetation, how the trees, how the plants have adapted themselves to survive in such condition where the rainfall is less. So they have to draw water, or they have to survive in such condition also, right? Then species, there are very few. The first one, which is khair, which is useful as a timber, timber, and also used for making dyes for tanning of leather. And wild dates also common in these scrub and thorn forests. So these are the two that I've given, that is khair as well as wild dates, which you find in this particular forest, right? Now that is to do with your vegetation type found on the basis of the variation of rainfall, okay? First one, as I said, the evergreen, deciduous, thorns, desert, semi-desert, and scrub and thorn forest. Now we move on with the mountain or mixed forest, all right? Mountain or mixed forest, which is found in the hilly mountainous regions, where the range of, definitely, because it's in the mountainous regions, so the temperature will definitely, the temperature will be less. So less than 20 degrees Celsius, or areas where the altitude is above 1500 meter above the region, unless it reaches the alpine zone. That is the limit, okay? And rainfall ranges, again, it is more, that is 150 to 200 centimeters of annual rainfall. Now these forests, if you see, it's also called mixed forest because it is a mixture of both deciduous as well as mountain or coniferous forest. Coniferous trees, as you see, forest, okay, they have adapted themselves in such a way that they are found in the very high mountainous region. After a certain limit, you find this kind of a vegetation, or the trees have adapted themselves like cone shaped. So that one of the factor is that in areas, or in some cases where the snowfall is very heavy, it just slides down instead of it settling on the branches. So that's why it's made in such a way that the snow can slide down. So that is why these trees are found in coniferous forests and deciduous, as I again told you, deciduous forests we have already done. So that is why, because you find these two varieties mixed together, that is why mountain forests are also known as mixed forest or mixed vegetation. They occur in the transition zone. Transition means the changing zone of mixed and coniferous in the deciduous and the coniferous forest. In that particular zone, in that particular belt, you find this kind of vegetation. That is mountain or mixed forest. So if you are asked, like mention one of the characteristics of mountain or mixed forest, from the title, from the thing itself over here, and you can say that these are the forests where you find both type of vegetation characteristic, that is both coniferous as well as deciduous, right? Then species, these are many I've given: silver fir, deodar, chirpine, spruce, cedar, and of course in the north, eucalyptus, as well as eucalyptus is found in the Nilgiris. Nilgiris means in southern India. So there are few areas where you find these kind of vegetation. So it's a mixture, see, of both deciduous as well as, let's say, coniferous forests together, right? So till that, we had the variation in the rainfall. Now, another one, as we see, is tidal. It's mentioned mangrove, or it's also called littoral forest. Okay, these are found in the coastal areas, as it's mentioned here. The famous Sundarbans, okay, along the deltas over here. It's not found in the western coast, remember, because there are no deltas over here, because you don't have rivers flowing here. I did it in the first chapter on climate because of the elevation. The rivers draining here, all draining into the Bay of Bengal, forming deltas. So this is, see, Kaveri, okay, Mahanadi. Then we have the entire region over here, the Sundarbans, which is shared both by India as well as Bangladesh. So the tidal mangrove forest over here, from the word why it's called tidal forest, right? Tidal forest in the sense that these forests have got, let's say, the characteristic of these forests is that they can withstand any kind of tidal action. They can withstand any kind of tidal action, and they act as a speed breaker. As the waves, as the tides flow in, okay, inflow of it, it acts as a speed breaker, and the flow of the water is reduced as it comes inward. And this is the main reason why, and since it's found along the coastal region, it's called the tidal forest. Now see the temperature range again. You have to remember, very heavy rainfall or of more than 200 centimeters. So these forests are found in areas of very heavy. As you can see that they are found confined only to the coastal areas, not in the interior. Now, the characteristic is that mangrove vegetation is characterized by special roots which are called breathing roots, okay, which act as the respiratory organs, and they entangle and they are found very close on the surface of the water. So these are characterized by breathing roots. That's only in case of tidal forest, and they act as respiratory organs for them. Okay, the stilt-like roots remain submerged underwater and can be seen at low tides, and these forests are very, very dense. Now let me just give you an example of the Sundarbans. This particular Sundarban is, as you know, it is a homeland for the Royal Bengal tiger, and apart from that, the most important tree that is found in the Sundarban is by the name of Sundari. The name of the tree is Sundarban. The name of the tree over here, the Sundarbans, okay, Sundarbans actually derives its name from the most common tree that is found in this particular area by the name of Sundari. And these are very hardwood trees, and these the timber, okay, from these trees is used for boat building by the fishermen, and also used as fuel for domestic purposes. So this is one example I've given you, Sundarbans, okay. So the stilt-like roots remain submerged underwater and can be seen at low tide, and these are very dense, right. As I've given you, I already told you Sundari, Sundarban Delta has been named after it, and the wood is very hard, strong, durable, hence it is used for boat building. And apart from that, another one or two varieties which is seen a fuel for household, that is by the name of Gorjan, G-O-R, or sometimes in some books in text it's given as G-U-R also. So it is given that way also. So Gorjan and Hintal, these are the names, okay. And some of the other names have also been given, so you can just look at these ones, okay. It's called Kepra and also Rhizophora, that's also given. These are some of the varieties of the names of the species of trees that are found in the coastal area that comprises of the Sundarbans, okay. So that is to do with your mangrove forest. So today we've done vegetation. Apart from that, the variation, the categorization of the natural vegetation, depending on the variation of rainfall and depending on the relief structure, right? So as I've already told you, you have to know the climatic factor, that is the temperature, rainfall, which is required for the different vegetation that we see in our country. So that I'm going to give it to you in the next class when I'll be presenting that for you. So getting a fair idea about that, you should be able to do it in your exercise copies, so that it'll be easy for you to remember. Instead of doing page wise, if you do it in the table format, see, this is something which you have to do, whether differences, similarities, or these kind of features when we do soils, or even agricultural, let's say when we come to the chapter on agriculture, different various crops, cash crops, food crops, plantations, all right? So when you do it in the table format, it'll be much more easier for you to remember instead of doing page-wise, right? So in the next class, I'll be discussing about this, the interrelationship between relief, vegetation, climate. So all these things I'm going to discuss, and along with as I've already promised you, I'm going to give it to you all in the table format. So till then, stay safe and stay at home, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, we are back once more with the computer application for ICSE 2021. Previously we had done nested switch case. We move on from there, okay? So let's see what we have got today. Today we will be dealing with if-else, fine? If-else is also a branching statement, conditional branching statement. What are the specific properties of if-else? It is a true conditional statement. Why it is called a true conditional statement? Because the test condition that we have in if can check for any relational operation, okay? When we compare this with switch, in switch the test variable was used to compare only for equality. The case value matches with the test variable or not. But in case of if-else, we can use any of the relational operation. Equal, less than, greater than equals to, less than equals to, not equals to, and so on. Okay, fine. Then we can use any data type. In the condition, we can use any data type, any of the 9 data types: byte, short, int, long, float, double, boolean, char, or string. Okay. In fact, we can even combine the conditions to form a compound condition. Fine. So if-else is a true conditional statement. So these are the basic properties of if or if-else. Now when we speak of if-else, there are 4 different formats of using it. The first one is a simple if. Only if. We don't use the else part, only the if part. Second one is the if-else, the normal one. Then we have got a nested if-else. That is one if-else within another if-else. Okay. And finally we got the if-else if. If-else if is also called if-else if ladder. It is also a form of nesting. In nested if-else, the next if-else is in the body of the first if. In case of if-else if, the next if statement will be within the body of the else. Okay. So these are the 4 different format of if-else, 4 different ways in which if we can use if-else. So first we start off with a simple if without the else part, only if. So when we speak of this if, we have got only one option. Okay, not 2 options, only one option. Generally with if-else you got 2 options, one with the if, one with the else. But here we have got only one option. Test condition is written with the if. It is not only for this one, for any if-else statement, the condition is always written within the if. You write the condition here within the bracket, within the parenthesis, right? Next, as we have seen in the point 1, there is only one option, and this option follows if. After you give if and the condition, then whatever you write is the option for this if. Only when condition is true, the option gets executed. So the one option that we have will get executed if the condition is true. If the condition is false, it is skipped. So when the condition is false, the option is skipped. Okay? The basic syntax or the format of if, you write if followed by the condition. The condition is given within the brackets. So if condition, then comes the body of the if. The option is written within the body of the if. This option can be one line statement or can be a multi-line statement. But if it is multi-line statement, together it forms one option. Right? Also you must remember that if this is a single line option, single line statement, you may not give the curly bracket. It is optional. The curly brackets will be optional if it is a single line statement. Now we know that any given condition is either true or false. So if the condition is true, what happens? The option gets executed. Only when the condition is true, this option is executed. Okay? After executing whatever is there, the control comes out. So condition true, control enters the body of the if. Whatever is there, it may be one line, it may be multi-line statement. Whatever is there, that will be executed sequentially, and at the end it will come out of the if. In case the condition is false, in that case this option is skipped. The control doesn't enter the body of the if. So we see from here that only when the condition is true, then this option gets executed. Otherwise it is skipped. So this is the basic syntax or the format of the normal if. I hope it is clear to everyone. Now we will move on to a program. We will try to solve a program using this concept of simple if. What we have got here, if a student's grade is A, then he or she is considered brilliant. So we are supposed to write a program to ask a student to enter the grade and then display the remark brilliant if it is A. So we need to check if the grade that has been entered by the user is A. If it is A, then we will display the remark brilliant. If it is not, we don't display anything. Okay? Fine? So we move on now. So what we need to input? We need to input the grade. We need to ask the user, the student, whoever is the user, to enter his or her grade. So the input will be grade. And then we need to check whether the grade that has been entered by the user is A. Okay? Not any other character. A. The alphabet A. We need to check this. So we will use the if statement to check whether the grade is A or not. And finally we need to display the remark brilliant. If the grade is A, then the output will be brilliant, the remark brilliant. Fine? So these are three things that we get from the question. How many variables we need? We need one variable. Why? That because we need to store only the grade entered by the user. We don't need any other values to be entered by the user or to be used in the program. So we need only one variable. So what will be the data type? The data type will be char. Why char? Because we are asking the user to enter the grade, and which is an alphabet. Grade A, a single alphabet, a single character. So the data type of this variable will be char. Fine? And then let's give the name as GD, GD for grade. Okay? So these are the things that we have in our mind before we start the program. That we'll be using one variable. The variable will be chart type. Variable name will be GD. We'll be taking the value from the user. Okay? And then we'll check whether the value that is entered by the user is A or not. And if it is A, then we'll print the remark brilliant. Okay? Now we are set to start writing the program. So we move on now. So first we give a comment. As you know, comments are optional. You may give, you may not give. It has no effect on the actual program execution. But here we are using a comment, single line comment. So program on if else, if, not if else, sorry, if, only if. Next we use the util package. So import java.util.asterisk. Next we create the class, public class grade. Okay. We open the curly bracket for this class. Then we create the main function, public static void main. The body of the main is started. We create an object SC of the scanner class. So scanner SC equals to new scanner system.in. Fine. Now we declare the variable and initialize it to nothing, empty space. So char gd equals to empty space. Since it is a chart type, we are placing this empty space within single quotes. Okay. Single quote, single character literal has to be placed within single quotes. Now remember, our program is supposed to be interactive. We need to tell our user what is expected from them. So our program should display a remark to the user telling him or her to enter the grade. So to display anything, we use system.out.print. So system.out.print /n, enter your grade. /n is a escape sequence character. That is, before it starts, it goes to the next line and just starts printing. In case of, instead of /n, you may use println. Okay, but it is a different thing. Right? We'll come to a episode where I'll discuss the difference between system.out.print, println, and the function of /n. Fine. So in this program, we are displaying enter your grade. Now we have to accept the value from the user. Since it's a single character, whatever value is being given, then using char at function or char at function at 0, the position at 0, we are extracting the character and storing it in GD. So whatever the user has entered will now be stored in the variable GD. Okay. So the input part is over. Now comes the checking part. We need to check by using the if statement. If GD is the variable. So whatever value is stored in GD is same as A or not, equals, double equals to. That is, we are checking whether the value that is stored in the variable GD, the value that is entered by the user, which is stored in GD, is same as this alphabet A or not. This is the variable, this is the char literal. It is a literal, so placed within single quotes. So we are checking whether the value that is stored in GD is same as this character literal A. So if it is, then within the body of the if, we are printing out you are brilliant, because that is the program that was given to us to display the remark brilliant, you are brilliant, if the grade is A. So when we are checking this, if the condition is true, remember, if the condition is true, it will come here. So if the condition is true, that is, if the value given by the user is A, then we will print out you are brilliant. And then we stop this if, we end the if. Okay. So input has taken place, checking has taken place, the output has taken place, the display has taken place. So do we need anything more? Okay, we don't need anything more. So we now close the main function and we close the class. Clear? So this is your simple program to check whether the grade entered by the user is A or not. If it is A, we will display the remark brilliant. But a question might arise in your mind, if the user gives small a, here we are checking for capital A. If the user gives small a, then what happens? In this logic, if the user gives small a, it will not print anything. Only when the user gives capital A will it enter this option and display you are brilliant. But then we should include small a also. So for this, what we do, instead of just writing GD equals to double A, Now we have two relational operation, GD double equals to small a and GD double equals to small a. So we are checking whether the value of GD is capital A or the value of GD is small a. So two relation, one is here and one is here, and we have combined it using this pipe symbol. This is the OR, the logical OR operator. So now what happens is we are combining this relation with this relation. We have used the OR, logical OR operation. That means if either of these conditions are true, if either of this relation is true, then this compound relation will be taken as true. When you use the OR relational operator or logical operator, only when both the conditions, both the relations are false, then this compound relation will be false. In all other cases, it will be taken as true. So we are checking either this is true or this is true. If either of them are true, it is brilliant. If neither of them are true, then this will be skipped. Okay? Fine. So now we will run this program. Our program is ready. So let's execute this program. I have executed this program in BlueJ. Most of you will be using BlueJ in your school. So when you execute on that BlueJ terminal window, this is what you get. Remember, in the first line in your program, we had given enter your grade. This is the statement that comes to the user. This is the statement that the user sees on the terminal window. So when the user sees this statement, he or she knows that we have to enter the grade. Okay? Remember, your program should be interactive. Your program should tell the user what it expects from the user. So my program or our program is expecting the user to enter the grade. So enter your grade. This statement will come on the screen. Now the user, suppose, gives the grade as A and enters. The moment the user gives A and enters, the remark comes, you are brilliant. So if the user has given grade A, here we have given capital A. If the user gives small a also, it will be same thing, capital A or small, you will get the message. The program gives the message, you are brilliant. Okay? Fine. Now let's see what happens if we give some other alphabet. So I run the program once more. Again it is asking enter your grade. Suppose I give B. Okay? We are not checking for B, we are checking for only A. So when you give B, the value of the variable, remember the variable was GD, so value of GD is now B. But in our program we are checking whether it is A or not. So obviously value of GD will not match with A. GD is B and we are comparing with A. So B is not equals to A. That means the condition will be false. So when the condition is false, the option that is there within the if statement, that is to print brilliant, will be skipped. So when I press this, what happens is nothing comes. Nothing is being printed. I have already pressed A and entered. So there is nothing here because we have not written any statement after the if. The option within the if is skipped and then it ends. The program ends. So what we see here is when we press A, we get the remark brilliant. When we give some other alphabet like B or anything else, nothing happens. It will be blank. It comes blank. Okay? So this program tells you or shows you or gives you an idea of how to use the simple if. Fine? So next episode we will be dealing with some more programs based on the simple if. Sometimes in your program you will have to use the simple if with one option. That option is carried out when the condition is true. You don't need else. In some programming logic it will happen. Like this was an example. Tomorrow we will deal with, or in the next episode we will deal with some more programs where only if is required. The else part is not required. Okay? Fine. Thank you everyone. And as usual, stay at home and stay safe. Thank you.